G'day guys, and welcome back to another One Piece talking head information tips stuff video. Surely there's a good name for this. In today's video, we're going to be talking about what pre-release events are and how they work, what leaders to bring, what cards to look out for in your packs, some general tips and tricks, and then we'll give you a way that you can practice and prepare for your pre-release event. Alright, starting off with the first point, how do pre-release events work? Well, they will work in one of two ways. The first is a constructed event. So basically what that means is you bring your OP06 deck to the event. Same rules apply for a tournament, everyone dukes it out and the winner takes home the pre-release winner card. The second way is the more exciting way, and the way this video is mainly going to be focused at giving you tips and tricks for, and that is a sealed event. So how that works is you'll bring your own leader, bring your own Don cards as well, don't forget them, they're important. And on entry, you'll get 6 packs of OP06. And what you'll do is you'll open up those packs and you'll make a 40 card deck out of those cards, duke it out, the winner takes home the prize. Now there are some variations on the deck building rules when it comes to these events. The first is, as we've mentioned, it's a 40 card deck. The second is that there is no color restriction to your deck building. So basically what that means is if you bring a green leader, you can run green, blue, red, pink, purple, brown, doesn't matter what color cards, you can play them. The only time that color restriction still applies if you have a card that says it specifically searches for a certain color or interacts with a certain color, those rules still apply. The third thing is that there's no single card limit when it comes to your deck building. And what that means is if for some reason you pull error packs and all you get is secret rare Zoros, you can run 40 secret rare Zoros. That is no problem at all. You may have a tough time, but that's no problem or completely legal. Now that we know how they work, let's talk about some leaders that are going to be good to take to one of these events. Now on screen in front of me are the tried, true, proven, tested leaders that are really, really good for these kind of events. First of all, we have...
Let's try again.
On screen in front of me, we have the tried, proven, tested, the old faithful for these kind of events. The first that we have here is Zoro. So Zoro, attach 1 Don, buff everything by 1000. Really good for these events. Katakuri, attach 1 Don, you're buffing your attack by another 1000, so you're always swinging 7000, and then you get to check out your life or your opponent's life and put it at the top or the bottom. Really good information, 7k swings, super valuable. Green starter deck Captain Kid. This one allows you to get multiple swings off each turn. That pressure is just insane. And the last one, which is actually a pretty decent pick for this format, is blue starter deck Crocodile. This one you can Don -4, bounce something with a cost of 5 or less back to your opponent's hand. Now first of all, the board control is really good, but there are a few cards in this set that give you some extra effects when you have less Don than your opponent, which can make them super valuable with Crocodile. Now, if you're feeling extra spicy, you want to run one of the new leaders, let's talk about one of those. So if you do want to run one of the new leaders, what I would suggest is probably run Yamato. Generally for these kind of events, you want to stay away from the 4 life leaders just because it sets you back a little bit. But Yamato having double attack and then giving you the option to give 2 rested Don to something is just insanely valuable. So if you're feeling a bit ballsy and you want to play something new, go with the Yamato. And if for some reason you hate all of those suggestions, and I won't hold it against you, basically what you want to do with picking a leader is picking a leader that has a very generic effect. So basically something that's not locked by a certain archetype or requiring certain cost characters or type of characters to be on board. So a great example here is your starter deck Luffy, other things your starter deck Kaido, and your yellow Yamato, just to name a few. Now that we know what leaders are probably going to be good, let's talk about some cards. We're going to go over some staples, some cards that if you see them, definitely include them in your deck. Then we'll go over some cards to include if you still have the space, and then we'll talk about some filler cards to fill in the gaps, because most of these must include cards are of a higher rarity, so you're most likely going to have some space left over. All right, first of all, let's talk about our 2k counters. Basically, if you see any of these, you're going to run them. You want to maximize out on your 2k counters. And it is important to know that only 2 of your 2k counters that you can get are common. The rest are uncommon or higher. Now, there are some 2k counters in here that have some really neat effects, which you may need to play, otherwise definitely use as 2k counters. The ones that don't have good effects are the Sora, the Sindri, and the Zio. First of all, let's look at the Aisha, one of the ones that has a neat effect. On play, look at the top card of your opponent's life. then place it at the top or the bottom. So nice to know information, lets you reorder some things. That can be helpful sometimes. The Hayori is the next one. On play, you may put the top or bottom card of your life into your hand, and then you can replace it with something from your hand. So if you have some cool trigger in hand, put it in there. Saga's the next one. Don times 1. When attacking, this character gains 1,000 power until the start of your next turn. Then at the end of this turn, trash one of your film characters. Saga is a film, so if that's the only card you have on board that is film, he has to say bye-bye. But a 4 cost of 5,000 body, which will turn into a 7,000 body when attacking and using this effect, can be handy sometimes. Goyin is a great one. Your turn, once per turn, when your opponent activates an event, you can place one of their cards at the bottom of their deck. Now, depending on what people pull, there's likely you're going to see some events. So if you see this and you feel like you might be running into some event-heavy stuff, play it out, but most likely are going to be low counts of events. So just keep that in mind. Kamazo is not a bad one to run if you want to run Crocodile. When you return a Don from your field to the Don deck, you can KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. Bunch of blockers that we'll talk about later on that are 2 or less as well. Perone is a nice one. This is a super rare, so probably going to be hard to find, much like a Hayori. On play, if your opponent has 5 or more cards in the hand, you can choose one of the following. Your opponent has to discard 1 card from the hand, or 2, give one of your opponent's characters -3 costs for the turn. You're probably always going to use that first effect if you're going to use this in this kind of event. And the last is Suru. On play, trash 2 cards from your hand. Your opponent returns one of their characters to their hand. No restriction on cost or power, which is insane. So once again, if you see a 2k counter, just put it in regardless. Alright, next up, we're going to talk about blockers. For OP06, I'd probably say just max out on your blockers. Same problem that we have with the 2k counters, a lot of the blockers are of higher rarity, and most of the time I would say run anywhere between 4 to 8, but I'd be surprised if you found anywhere more than 4 to 8 blockers in the packs that you open. And as I mentioned before, we've got a few 2 cost blockers going on here. The Hammond, the Shiki, and the Cerberus are all 2 cost blockers regardless. The Borsellino is only a blocker if you have 5 or less cards in your hand, so keep that in mind. It is a nice stat line 2-4, which is like basically a vanilla, so a good card to pick and run regardless. The Shiki does have a bonus effect as well on play. If you have 8 or more Don cards on field, you can draw 1 and then discard 1. So great to just get some hand cycle, unbrick some things sometimes. The Shiraya is a great blocker as well. When attacking, when blocking, once per turn, this character's base power becomes the same as the power of your opponent's leader until the start of your next turn. So you can basically buff into 5k for free, which is really nice. There's not a whole lot of effects in this format, the sealed format, that will buff leaders above that, but it's nice to be able to go to 5 without any kind of Don investment. Jonji also has another effect. If you have equal or less Don on the field, then your opponent gains 1,000 power, so a good one to run if you want to run Crocodile. You can get up to 6k pretty easily. Momo secondary effect is somewhat viable. On play, place one of your Wano type characters other than Momo on the top or the bottom of your life face up. There are a fair few kind of lower rarity Wano type cards that we could pull, so that second part of the effect could be viable. Otherwise, it is a nice 6k blocker to run. Then Amaraki, the big bad blocker of the set. 8,000 power, massive. The other effect, activating once per turn, discard 1 card from your hand and return 1 cost 2 or lower characters to the bottom of your opponent's deck, and then this card gains 3,000 power during the turn. So it becomes a whopping 11k attack on your turn, which is absolutely insane, and you get to clear a blocker. As we mentioned, a lot of these lower rarity blockers are 2 cost or less, so can be a good one. Alright, moving on to vanillas. I would say you definitely want to max out on all the vanillas that you see. They're just cheap and big, half your opponent to deal with, and helps you apply some great pressure. So we have the Snyder 3 cost of 5,000 body with the Gembo, the exact same stats there. We have the Lola, a 4, 6,000. The Sengoku 5, 7,000. Same with Eldorado, and then we've got a 6, 8 in our Gaspard and Watatsumi. So yeah, max out on the vanillas. They're great value in the sealed format. Now, as it comes to events, this is kind of where it can be a little bit tricky, but these ones on screen, I'd say if you see them, definitely run them. The others, maybe. We'll talk about some of them in the next page. You're the One Who Disappear is great value. It is the 0 cost buff something by 3,000 by trashing a card from your hand. Really, really valuable in this format. The trigger is also really good if you have 0 life cards. Put the top card of your deck into your life. Then you can trash one card from your hand. So this can work if you have no cards in your hand as well. You can still get that recover of your life. Billion Fold, cost you 1. You can buff something by 2,000 power. Then if there are 8 or more rested cards in the field, it gains an additional 2,000 to that buff. So potentially could be 4,000. Might be a little bit hard to achieve all of that, but definitely a nice 1 cost 2,000 buff. The trigger is you can KO a 3 cost rested character. Now nothing happened, great moment in the anime. 3 cost, counter, add the top card of your life to your hand, then all of your 7 cost or lower characters cannot be KO'd in battle this turn. And let me tell you, pretty much all the characters that you have will be 7 cost or less. So this is going to be protecting everything, which is why it's super valuable to run. And the trigger is the exact same effect as well. Now moving on to some other events that are not counter, but you probably do want to run if you do see them. The first is Gum Gum King Kong Gatling. Main, give one of your leader characters 3,000 power. Then if your opponent has a character with 7,000 power or more, give one of your leaders or characters an additional 1,000 power for the turn. So 2 costs to buff something by 3,000 can be nice to get some good extra swings in at leader, help clear up some of the bigger vanillas. And the trigger is actually really good. KO one of your opponent's characters with 5,000 power or less. That's going to hit a majority of things that are out there in this format. Negative Hollow, another great one. 2 costs, you can trash a card from your opponent's hand. That is at random though, no one gets to choose that. And the trigger is the exact same effect as well. So nice way to control some very limited resources in the sealed events. Flowering Water, costs you 3. Activate main, KO one of your opponent's characters with 5,000 power or less. So just good board control removal stuff there. The trigger is you can KO something with 4,000 power or less. You couldn't even kill my boredom, cost you 4. You can choose one of the following: rest something with a cost of 6 or less, or you can KO one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 6 or less. And the trigger is to activate the main effect there as well. Reject, another great 4 cost one. You can choose to either KO a 5 cost character or less. The other part of that effect is if your opponent has 1 life, you can deal that damage to them, and then you have to take 1 of your own life as well. The last of the activate main events that you probably do want to run is Gravity Blade, cost you 7, hefty, but you can place 2 characters with the cost of 6 or less at the bottom of your opponent's deck. Great board control right there. Right, moving on to the characters outside of the blockers, the 2k counters that you do want to run if you do see them. The first is Onami, cost you 2, 3,000 body, has a counter of 1,000. On play, you can give one of your leaders or characters Banish. Insane. The trigger, you can KO something with a cost of 5 or less. Also absolutely insane. You see Nami, you definitely want to play Nami. Inazuma is the next one you definitely want to play. 4 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. When this character has 7,000 power or more, it gains Banish. Also very, very good, and quite easy to get that to 7,000 power by just slapping 2 Don underneath. Arlong's the next good one to run. 4 cost, 6,000 body, no counter. On play, you discard 1 card from your hand. Up to one of your opponent's rested leaders cannot attack until the next turn. The trigger is you can rest one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 4 or less. Ryuma is another great one, same stat lines as Arlong, 4 cost, 6,000 body, no counter. On play and on KO, KO one of your opponent's rested characters at the cost of 4 or less. Double value right there with this character. Another 4 cost, 6,000 body in Kiko Nuju. Did I say that right? On KO, if your opponent has 3 life or less, place the top card of your deck into your life. So nice bit of recovery there. The trigger, if your opponent has 3 or life less, you get to play the card, which is really nice. Nekomamushi, the next one, 4 cost, 5,000 body, has that 1,000 counter. Don times 2, this character can also attack your opponent's active characters. Really valuable in this format, great for ball control. The trigger, same as the last one. If your opponent has 3 or less life, you can play this card. Hayazo is the next 4 cost, 6,000 body with no counter, activate main. Once per turn, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less, and this character gains 1,000 power during this turn. Then you add the top card of your life to your hand. So there's a bit of a trade-off with this effect. You do get 2 things out of it. You get a rest and a buff, but you do have to take a life, so just be nice and careful when using that effect. But that 6,000 body is really good value. Next up, we have the Brook, 6 cost, 6,000 body. On play, you can choose to do one of the following. Put one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less in the trash. So that's not KOing it, so you can avoid on KO effects, which is nice. Or your opponent can put 3 cards from their trash at the bottom of the deck in any order. You're mainly going to be using that for that first effect when it comes to this format. 40 Jones is a great one, 7 cost, 8,000 body. It's basically in there for that rush. On play, you do also get to rest up to 2 of your opponent's characters or Don. then you have to add the top card of your life to your hand, but a well worth a trade for that rush and double rest. Haughty is a super rare, so it's unlikely that you will see it, but if you do see it, super great value. Next up we have Gecko Moria, also a super rare, a cost 9,000 body. On play, choose a 4 or less character and a 2 or less character from your trash. You can play one active and you can play the other one rested. Blockers galore you can get out there, some of your nice 4 cost characters you can get out there. You have super great value in this format. The next up we have is the secret rare Zoro. Very unlikely that you'll see this, but if you do, absolutely fantastic. 9 cost at 9,000 body. You're basically getting 3 attacks with the Zoro. You get the normal attack, then you can trigger the first effect to rest 1 Don to then set it as active, swing again, then you can trigger that second effect to rest another 2 Don to set Zoro as active again, and you can swing again. Insane. If you see it, definitely run it. And the last one that is a definitely must-have run, is also super rare, so keep that in mind, is the Shanks. Costs you 10, 12,000 body. On KO, you can KO something with 10,000 power or less. Alright, next up we're going to be moving on to the characters. So if you have space, run these guys, and I'd say most of the time you will have space plus extra with these guys here. The first one is Max, costs you 1, 2,000 power. This is basically the promo Gordon. Activate main, you can place this character at the bottom of your deck to minus something by 3,000 power for the turn. Basically helps you with ball control, so you can bring those big bad boys to a more manageable level that you can get rid of them. Toki's a great one. 2 cost, 3,000 body, 1,000 counter. Don times 1. If you have 4 or less cards in your hand, this character cannot be KO'd in battle. The 4 or less can be quite easily achieved if you have some early countering going on. Next up we have Kuzan. 3 cost, 5,000 body, no counter. On play, draw 2, and then you place 2 cards from your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order, so it just helps you unbrick your hand, get some nice cycle going on. Raizu is another great one. 3 cost, 4,000 body. These 3 cost 4,000 ones are really valuable. I need to add 1 Don to be able to swing in at leader, which is nice. The when attacking here is you can discard 1 card from your hand, rest one of your opponent's Don cards, so it can help you when you're trying to avoid counters. There's not going to be heaps of them, but can be valuable if you think your opponent does have some. The trigger is mainly why we want to play this. If your opponent has 3 or less life, you can play this card. These kind of triggers are really valuable in this format. Kamakiri is another great one with basically the same stats there. 3 cost, 4,000, 1,000 counter. We won't worry about the activate main there because we don't have any stage cards that we can use to activate that. Well, I should say I don't suggest running any of the stage cards that you can activate that effect with. The trigger is why we want to run it. If your opponent has 2 or less life, you can play this card. Kawamatsu, 3 cost, 5,000 body, no counter. 5,000 body is really good. The when attacking generally won't come up. People shouldn't really be playing anything with the 0 power, but it can pair well with the max, where you then get to place that 0 cost, the 0 power character at the top or the bottom of your opponent's life. The trigger, once again, the main reason why we're running this, if your opponent has 3 or less life, you get to play this card. Braham, also one of these ones we've seen before. 3 cost, 4,000 body, 1,000 counter. Once again, you're not really going to use the effect here because it requires stage cards, which I don't really recommend running once again, but the trigger, opponent has 2 or less life, you get to play this card. Next up, we have Pudding. 4 cost, 4,000 body, 1,000 counter. On play, your opponent returns all cards in their hand to their deck. They shuffle it and then they draw 5 cards. So this is really good if your opponent for some reason has a massive hand. You can just whittle their hand down quite nicely and they get a reset. So if they're holding on to some valuable cards, also really good for you. Do have to keep in mind, maybe you help your opponent draw into an absolutely insane hand and then it's your own fault. Inarashi, 4 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. Insane stats right there. The main effect, Don times 2 when attacking, discard a card from your hand. So hefty kind of amount of resources required to do this. 2 Don and a card from your hand. But then you get to KO one of your opponent's characters that with a cost equal to or less than their total life. The trigger also really good. All the yellow triggers we've spoken about. 3 life or less your opponent has, you get to play this card. Garp's a nice one. 5 cost, 7,000 body, no counter. Don times 2 when attacking. If you have 4 or less cards in your hand, your opponent cannot activate blocker. As I said, we have some early counter going on. This can be quite easy to achieve this hand size. Denjuro, 5 cost, 6,000 body. Don times 2, if your opponent has 3 life or less, this character cannot be KO'd effects. Really good late game. The trigger, same as the yellow triggers before. 3 life or less your opponent has, you get to play this card. Bear King is some good value, 5 cost, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter. If your opponent has a leader or character with a base power of 6,000 power or higher, this character cannot be KO'd in battle. There's a few cards around that 6,000 power which people should be playing, so this Bear King becomes valuable with that. Ichi's an okay one here with 7 cost, 7,000 power on play. If you have equal or less Don than your opponent, you can minus one character by 2,000 power, and then this character gains rush. Becomes really good once again when you're playing Crocodile, when you are behind with that Don curve, but is good late game because the effect does trigger with equal Don as well. Lastly, we're looking at Zeph. Zeph's 7 costs, 7,000 body. On play, Don -1, stop the effect of one of your opponent's characters. Then if they have 5,000 power less, you get to KO it. Really good against blockers. You can stop their blocker effect and then get rid of it. Now we'll talk about some cards that if you got some gaps, we're trying to fill them, this is where we'll fill them with. The Gyro, great one, 1 cost, 2,000 body, just good for those low stuff there. On KO, rest one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 3 or less. Helps you with a lot of those blockers. The Hitetsu, same kind of stats there. 1 cost, 2,000 power, 1,000 counter. The Trigger may be useful depending on what other characters that you have there. Buffs a land of one, a leader or character by 2,000 power. The Baron is just it's okay stat line. 2 cost, 3,000 body. You're going to attach 2 Don there to swing. The effect doesn't apply here. The Soul is very similar. The 2 cost, 3,000 stats. The on KO is not a bad one. You can place one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 2 or less at the bottom of your owner's deck. The Earl, similar stat lines right there with the 2, 3,000 power. On play, you can Don -1, rest one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 2 or less. Helps you get around blockers once again mainly. Jigoro, same stats there, 2 cost, 3,000 power, 1,000 counter. On KO, give one of your opponent's leaders or characters plus 1,000 power for this turn. Daruma is those 3 cost, 4,000 kind of stat line, which is nice to have. Probably generally prioritize this kind of stat line when it comes to your gap filling. The effect there is not really going to apply because you need a Fishman Pirates leader. Similar thing going on here with the Doosun, that's just mainly there for that 3 cost, 4,000 power stat line. Same with your Sai. Your Reiji is your next one you might want to run. 4 cost, 5,000 power, 1,000 counter. On play if you have equal or less Don than your opponent. And if you have 5 or less cards in your hand, you get to draw 2. So a lot of specifics needed for that, but can come up. Pervy Zombie, 4 cost, 5,000 power stats. Nice to have there. The on play is you're returning 2 cards from your trash to your bottom of your deck, and then you can KO something with a cost of 2 or less, so it helps once again with those blockers. Hachi is just that great stat line right there. Sometimes that trigger will come up depending on your pull, but very unlikely, mainly just in there for that stat line. The Sakazuki, 5 cost, 6,000 body, no counter, so you probably want to try and lean away from these cards that don't have counter when it comes to gap filling, unless you're really struggling for some bigger boys. On play, place a character with a cost of 2 or less at the bottom of the owner's deck. Similar stat line here with the Niji, 5 cost, 6,000 power, has a counter. The on play, if you have equal or less Don than your opponent, so good late game, good early game with Croc. You can choose one of the following: KO one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 2 or less, once again blockers, or you can return one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand. Becomes a bit more viable, versatile right there. Tot, also good stat line, 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter. The main effect, not going to use here. The Guild, also same stat line, 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter. The on play, not going to be used here either. Wiper is the 5 cost, 7,000 power. Nice stat lines there, no counter, so keep that in mind. And the on play effect we're not going to use because we're not going to be running the 1 cost stage event at all. Bullet, great one mainly for the stat line, 6 cost, 7,000 power, 1,000 counter. That unfortunately does not become a blocker because we're not recommending any film type leaders. Shark's Arrow, main effect KO up to 2 of your opponent's rested characters with the cost of 3 or less. The trigger is exactly the same there, so good kind of bit of board control to fill some space. White Snake, if you're desperate for a counter, this one costs you 2, buff something out 1, but you do get to draw. The trigger, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put them at the top or the bottom in any order, so it can help you unbreak a really bad kind of top deck stuff, or can help you order the cards that you really need coming up. Black Bug is a decent one for 4 cost, kind of late game or early game with Croc. Once again, if you have equal or less Don than your opponent, you can place one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 5 or less at the bottom of the deck. Trigger is you can bottom deck a character with a cost of 4 or less. And the last card to kind of try and fill some gaps there, on play, rest all of your opponent's characters with the Noah's Ark. And the trigger is to basically play this card, get the same effect going on there. It does cost you 6 though if you play out of hand, so just keep that in mind, but can be good to kind of close out some games. Now for some general tips, question people usually ask, first or second? What do I want to do? Well, looking at the curves there, it doesn't really matter which way you go. You have good odd curves, you have good even curves, but I'll probably say there are a fair few 3-cost characters that you could play in your vanillas, or those 3 cost 4,000 bodies, which you spoke about. So maybe going first might be the better choice, because you get that early swing in, and then hopefully you have one of those 3-cost characters in your hand that you can then play out. So you've got a nice board presence as well as some pressure next turn. Things to keep in mind: 2k counters are probably going to be of low resource. Generally what the amount you pull is what the amount your opponent will have, so try keep track of that. And blockers could be a bit of a hit and miss there, so but general, try and account for the same amount that you pull for what your opponent has. Alright, now let's talk about a way that you can actually practice deck building, playing for your pre-release event. Let's jump over to the webpage again. We're here at optc.gg. I'll leave a link to this place in the top of the description. But basically what we can see here, we've got a bunch of cards here. But what this is a pack simulator opening for OP06 for 6 booster packs. Exactly what you're doing for pre-release. So what you're going to do is come to this website, you press re-roll here, you'll get a count of your cards here, all of those there that you can choose from. You can then copy it to your clipboard, make it in your OPT TCG SIM, and then you can do private matches against some of your friends to try and practice there. So let's count up quickly some cards that we may want to run here. So we got the maxes in 1, 2, 3. Got the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's vanillas 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 for those must run off. Let's go backtrack and now look at those to include if we have some spaces. We had 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. So we need 4 more at this stage. Let's try and be careful here. We could run 37, 38, 39. There's 42 that we can run there. We can drop probably one of the rages for another soul here, or even another arc over here as well. But there you go, basically nice and quick. The guide makes it a little bit easier to try and figure out what cards you want to run, and then you can definitely run this multiple times, rolling it out through there, trying to get a good idea of what you may want to run, cards you want to try prioritize. But hopefully this guide makes it a lot easier for you when it comes to your pre-release event. But thank you so much for checking out the video. If you guys have any other tips or tricks, leave them in the comment section down below. We'd love to hear from you there as well. Stay beautiful, and we'll see you all in the next one.